Okay, hi, welcome to Dev Central, and today we're going to be learning about front-end web development, just the basics of it. And if you're curious and you want to see what it is and what's involved in it, this will be a great first video to watch. I will go into the technical parts of it and do all the nitty-gritty fun stuff. So if you want to have a piece of pen and paper beside you and write along as I go for it. And I will also be coding later on. I'm gonna start right now with a HTML slideshow I made. I got nice and fancy, and I'm gonna go over the different values and stuff we're gonna use. That way, when you put the tags and elements on the page, you know what they mean. And if you don't want to watch this part and you want to get to the code, I will I will try and put a card or a timestamp on the video so you can just skip to it. Okay, so hypertext markup language is what HTML stands for, and it's not coding or programming. What it is a bunch of tags and elements pretty much that you just throw the information into that you want the page to your website to show. And you have a specific format for HTML. And if you've looked into it before this video, you've seen how it goes HTML, head, body, and then HTML again. That's what that format is. If you haven't seen it, I'll show you later on. Don't worry, you'll see plenty of it. So our first main tag is the head tag, and this is the metadata, the technical information for the web page. That's like the CSS file location, different styles for the web page, title links, some scripts, your title. That's that little bar you see at the top above your little search bar on Chrome. That's all in the head tag. And there's different tags I will show you later on. I'll show you the title tag in this video. I won't get too deep into that. You don't need to worry about that, but that's just what's in there saying now. And the body tag is the nice meat of your burger. This is where anything your users seeing when they come to the website, this is where it is at on your HTML file. So any information in your body tag is what you're going to see on your web page. There are a bunch of different tags that you use in your body, and they each have their own purpose. Each tag has, I don't want to say each. There's two different types of tags, and not necessarily tags, but there's two different types of display properties a tag will have. That'll be inline and block. What those are, it's just how HTML is going to throw your information and content onto the web page. Just plain vanilla. It's just how it's going to show up by default if you don't style the web page. And these display properties also affect how your CSS acts. So I'll get into what the tags do and how they affect the tags, or how they affect CSS in the next part of this video. But inline elements will only take up as much width as they need. So they also don't start on a new line. What I mean by that is, let's say you have this A tag and you have another A tag right here. When you load up your HTML page, whatever you have in these two tags will just show up side by side. One won't show up here and another won't show up here, even though that's how you have it written. They'll just show up side by side. That's that default display property that they have. And if you want to look more into different inline elements, I'm going to have this link in the description, but this is the go-to for anything HTML, CSS, programming related in general. Is just always go check this out. It's great. Okay, so block level elements will take up the complete width of the page, and they start on a new line every time. So, like I said before, if you have this tag here and you have another tag here, they're just gonna, every time, they're gonna show up one above the other or below, however it may be. And the only way you can put them side by side is through styling them in CSS, which we'll learn how to do later on. There you go. It'll be fun. Okay, so I'm using Atom Editor. I will link the download for that in the description. It is a code text editor, and it's easy to use. I like using it for my front end work, like HTML and CSS. I won't use it for my JavaScript, but just HTML and CSS, I recommend using Atom. And so we're going to create our file. So wherever you want that file to be, new file. And then anytime I'm naming a HTML file, if it's my main file, which this is going to be our main file, I call it index. And then you put .html. Voila, there we go. Like I said, HTML has a specific format you have to follow, and if you're using the Atom text editor, like I am, then you have a shortcut to put the format in there for you. And that is just doing HTML like that and pressing enter. Come back up here and delete that. But this is the format you have to follow every time for HTML. This is the head, where all your metadata is, your body, where your main content is. It's wrapped in this so the web page knows that it's reading an HTML file. And so, like I told you, this is a title tag. This is what you will see up in the top bar of your web page. So I'm just going to call it login because we're just going to make a cool little login page with HTML and CSS. So let's just start by looking at the web page first. And to run this, of course, you got to save it. Control S. And then wherever you have your file stored, I have mine right here in this folder. I will right click on it and right click, and then I open with Firefox. I already have it open, so I'll pull that up. But as you can see, our web page is blank. There is nothing on it. So just to have some fun real quick, let's just type some stuff into the body of our text editor. So I'll say hello world. Let's save it. Open up your web page and refresh. Got hello world. So like I said, whatever you put in here in your body, the web page just spits it back out. But you have to use the tags HTML gives you so it spits it back out properly. So just if we do hello world and then goodbye, it does, just like I said, it puts them side by side. Except these have no display values, so it doesn't know how to put them on there. It just throws them on there. And when we want to go and use CSS to edit them, we can't because we have no specific way of saying what part we want to edit. So that's why we use tags. And so delete this real quick. Refresh your page. You'll see it's gone. Oh, I didn't save it. Okay, now it's gone. Cool. Now, since we want to create a login page, let's just put a simple login at the top here and an H1 tag, which is a heading tag, just so the people coming to our site know they're supposed to log on. So H1 is a block level element. That means every time you put an H1 or any type of tag like this on the page, when it loads up in the browser, it'll be on a new line every time, unless you use CSS to style it. So it doesn't do that. So we're going to say login, and then we're going to close out our tag and save and refresh. So there we go. It says login. Notice it's nice and bold. It's a little bigger. If we put a P tag and say hello, it'll look different because that H1 tag is meant to help you style your HTML file. So it's its own little tool. Like I said earlier, each tag is its own purpose. The H1 tag's purpose is to tell the browser that this is a heading, and also let your users know this is a heading in case, let's say, your CSS file doesn't load for some reason. Just kind of looking at it, you can see it stands out. But Okay, so now for CSS. Again, I'll put another timestamp here, and I'm going to talk. There's only a few slides this time. CSS can get pretty technical and deep, so I want to cover just the basics so that you can create this little login page and then still have a nice, easy understanding, and you're not just being choked with information. So let's start with the easy stuff. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and the best way to think of HTML and CSS is HTML being the foundation of something, and CSS being the design. So whatever you're doing with CSS, you need the HTML. You're not going to be able to do anything without the HTML part. That's the most important part of all of it, and the CSS is there to back it up and just make it look pretty. So the biggest part of starting with CSS is understanding the box model. Basically says that your content is shoved in a box, and when you're going to style it, think of how that content is placed inside that box. So as you can see, you have your margin, border, and padding, which is your margin, border, and padding, and then this blue area is your content. So your margin is the area and space on the very outside of your content and everything. It's the space surrounding everything that you can style pretty much. This is how much space you're going to have between other content. And like this margin and another piece of margin will collide, and they want their space. They love their space. And border is pretty much just that. It's a border outside of the padding in your content area, and you can make it black, white, red, any color. It could be solid, dashed. It's just that. It's a border, like a picture frame. And the padding is the amount of space in between your content and the border. So if you have no padding, then your border is just shoved right up against the content. It doesn't look very pretty normally. And so all these numbers right here are just a unit of measurement, like this says. It can be pixels, rems, percentage, vertical width, vertical height. You get to choose and you can manipulate all this, but this is what you want to worry about the most, is just the margin, border, padding, and how this is right here. So when you want to select certain tags on your HTML page, you have a couple different ways of using it. I'm going to show you these two right now, which is just your basic tag selector. So if you want to select every paragraph tag, you would just have a P. This should be lowercase. But if you want to select every paragraph tag, you would have a P and then these curly brackets. And however you want to style this P tag gets nested in these curly brackets and indented. And then you also have a class selector, which in CSS, it just has a little period dot in front of it. And then it's also curly braces and indent the display styles you're using. And aligning content. So when you're aligning content, you have to remember the box model, and you can take advantage of margin. You can normally set that to auto, and it should center your content, or sometimes you gotta center content, move content around inside that box model. So that's where you play with your padding, and you can move it left, right. You can center your text. You can have it be towards the top of the box model, towards the bottom, but you can move the margin on the outside of the box model, which is the space on the outside of the box model, and you can move your content on the inside of the box model. I'm going to start adding the CSS, and just like before, we're going to create the file, and I'm going to click on my web design folder, right click on that, new file, and then I'm going to call this one index.css also, just for naming convention purposes. And the first thing you always do is link your CSS file. It's easy to forget to do it, so I try to make a habit doing it first. I forget constantly, but that's why you gotta make it the habit. And to do that, you say link, and then rel for relationship is equal to style sheet. After that, you say href equals, and then the location of your file. If it's in this folder, then you just got to put index.css. So save that. Go over here. Our first step is to take our main content and let's just put a simple border around it so that we can see the box from our box model like we were talking about. So to do that, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to put this all in a div or a container. So I'm going to say div and then div, and we are going to add we got to indent this, and then we are going to give it a class title or class ID. So we're going to say class is equal to main. Save that. Come over here to our CSS. And we're going to say dot main because it's a class selector. We're going to put our curly braces, opening and closing. Press enter. And if this doesn't automatically indent, make sure you indent 4 spaces. And we're going to give it the border. So you say border, lowercase b, and we're going to make it a solid line that's black and 2 pixels. So save this and then let's look at our website and refresh it. Okay, there you go. So as I said before, the div is a block level element. It will take up the full amount of space it wants or it needs to, and it will take up a new line. But as you can see, this is the box model surrounding all this information. And to make it look nice, we're going to center the information in this box model, and then we're going to center this whole div in the middle of the page. And then we'll give it a background so it looks a lot better. But first, to center our content, I'm going to come to main and I'm going to say text align is equal to center. Save that, and let's see how that looks in our box model. Okay, so it looks a lot better. Now it's all centered. I don't like how our password input is pushing against the bottom. So let's give it some padding so it pushes a border and content away from each other to give it some space. Give it a padding of 25 pixels. Save it, come here and refresh. That looks a lot better. But this button, it's right here beside our input field and it doesn't look good. So now we want to put this button on a new line all by itself. So to do that, you can either come to button right here and give it a class selector, or since it's our only button in this login page, or in the program really, we can just call button, and that's what I'm going to do to make it simple. So I'm going to say button, and then, okay, so this button, the way it's pushing right here because it's not a block level element, it's an inline style. And like I said in the beginning, you have to, in CSS, put these manually on a new line, and we can give it a block display value to make it go to a new line. Show you how to do that. So we create our button right here, and then we say display is equal to block. If you can spell, I can't. And then let's go refresh and look at it. And voila, now it's on its own line. Our username and password field, those line up, those look a lot better, but our button's all the way over here. So we're gonna push it all the way over here by giving it a margin of auto. Like I said, when it comes to centering elements inside a box model, sometimes you can just use margin to push it to the middle. So go margin and say auto. Refresh that page again. And now it's centered, but it's pushed right up against this password field. So this also has its own box model around the button, and what we need to do is give this some margin and push it away from the password input field. Okay, so now that we have this button centered, let's give it some space from this top input field for the password. And this also has its own box model. Every element does. You can just contain those box models into a bigger box model, but we want to give this some margin from this element up here above it. So we had margin auto already, but let's say margin top to specifically change the top margin. So you get a margin and then top, and let's give it 5 pixels. And let's give it 10 pixels instead, because I don't like 5. Okay, so that looks a little better. I like that. And now, as you can see, this div that we created and put the border around, it's taking up the whole width of the page. I don't like the way that looks, so what I want to do is I want to bring the sides in. And the way I'm going to do that is by targeting the width attribute. Okay, so as you can see, our main div that we created, it takes up the whole width of the page, and it just doesn't look good. It doesn't look pleasing to the eyes. And so we want to just squish that width down and make it about 50% of what it's taking up now. And to do that, all you have to do is call the width attribute, and we'll go to our main to do that. Under padding, put width is equal to 70 or to 50 VW, and that stands for vertical width. And CSS has a bunch of different measurements for or units of measurement, and I'm gonna link. I have linked the developer Mozilla page. I'm gonna link my blog where I'm gonna be updating it and putting more HTML and CSS related content on there where you can learn more about it. But I'm just gonna say that this is a unit of measurement which you will need to know in the future if you want to keep doing web development. So let's save and look at it. Okay, that's a lot better. Let's put this whole box model for our main in the very center of the screen. To do that, again, I'm going to come up to the top of our main. I'm going to say margin is equal to auto. That should center it left and right. Let's go and see. It does. And then I am going to have to push the height to the center. And to do that, I'm going to use margin top again, just to put that space between the top of this border and the top of the page. So come below width right here. Okay, so to do that, like I said, we are going to go to our CSS and put margin top and give that a value of 30 vertical height or VH. We'll save that, come over here, refresh and look at it. And I already refreshed mine, but as you can see, it's placed in the very center of the page. And that looks pretty bland, so let's put a background image behind it to make it look a little bit nicer. I have a background image that I already picked out. I'm going to put the link for that in the description, and you can just copy and paste it. But we want this to take up the whole body of our page. And so to do that, we have to call our and to do that, we have to call that body tag. So we can say body, the curly brackets, and then put background image. And since we're using a URL, you have URL and then your parentheses. But there's different ways to use background image and different attributes you can put right here. So you can look into that on Mozilla too, if you'd like. But we're gonna save that and refresh our page. Voila. Okay, so as you can see, you can see it through our div and everything right here. I kind of want to give this a white background so it stands out, and then I want to round these box corners off. So let's do that. We're going to have to go to our main and give it a background color. And we're going to give it white, give it whatever color you want. And then I'm going to come up here to border just so it's, if we ever want to come back and recode and redesign this, it's easier. let's say border radius, and give it a value of, we'll say 15 pixels, and let's see how that looks. Refresh. So it's white. You can see that we have these rounded edges. And there you go. It's your first login page using CSS and HTML. I will work on having a video out hopefully by next week for the JavaScript portion, where whatever you want to type into here and here, whenever you press enter, you'll be able to print those out in the console. And if you don't know what the console is, come over here to Developer Tools. It's a great way to work on debugging CSS and stuff like that. This is your console, and you can use it to interact with JavaScript. And if you want to see your HTML and CSS, over here to your elements and just look at your body div. We have our h1. You see that login right there. As you can see, this is our main class, that div we created, and that we have a form here with, there we get 2 input fields. And if we click on our div, we can see all the CSS we did. So let's just click that, takes away the margin, takes away our text align. Just play around with that if you like, but this is remember how to use this because you're going to need it in the future. It's just a great tool. It's built into every web browser. But thank you for watching. Hope you learned something, and have a nice day.